Hey, welcome back to another Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, bestselling author and comic creator Josh Grant. And today, our special guest is Christine Reynebeau. Christine, she does all these fantastic children's books. She has kind of different ones with like animals and also kind of dealing around like different morals. I've read several of them and they really are fantastic. She has such a great heart for people and for kids. And we're going to get to talk about animals and books. If you want to check out any of her works, we have them all down there in the description below if you want to look at them during this time. But just a bit about her before we bring her on. Christine Reynebeau grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, go Packers, and graduated from the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, with a Bachelor of Science, Animal Science, and has worked in the youth development field. In 2013, she was accepted to publish with the Vanity Press, beginning her career with the children's book PB&J, which is a good book. I've read that one. In September 2017, she began a great new adventure, developing her own publishing company, Dream Built Books, which she still works with to this day. In addition to all of this, she is also a motivational presenter who has presented at the Untitled Town Book Festival, as well as for workforce development programming and church library associations. She is an award-winning author as well. Her books have won awards. And so we're going to get a chance to talk all about her children's books and about animals and her crazy life. So let's bring her on. Oh, Christine. Hi, welcome. It's so great to have you on Diabolic Shrimp.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and I love the fact that you have a special guest with us. You have a dog, which I think everyone should bring a dog when they come on the show, or a pet. And so you can bring a shrimp too. But tell us about who you have with you.
Yeah, we'll see how long we have his attention for. He's staring at some snacks that I have to bribe him. But this is Walter, and we'll see. We'll show off his cute face here for a second. There we go.
Hi, Walter.
So this is Walter, and Walter is a rescue that I got 6 years ago. And he is a character in 2 of our books. So that's why he's joining us. This is his first interview ever.
Oh my gosh, yes. And, Walter is adorable. And he also represents our audience. Like, they mostly don't stare at the screen, they just eat snacks. And so it's good. Like, it's the way to go. Everyone, if you're watching this, grab some snacks. We have some people down there in the live chat. Dr. Wild, welcome. Joe's Roll 39YT. Go check out his channel. So welcome all of you. And so, if anyone has questions for Christine at any point, throw them out there. I'll put her in the hot seat, or for Walter by any means. Tell us what trick you'd like to see Walter do, and we'll make him do it. poor Walter.
We'll try.
Yeah, it's his first interview, so go easy on him. All right, so let's dive in and get to know you. And I'm gonna be so distracted by Walter. I'm like, look at his floppy ears.
Try working all the time with him around.
Yeah. So all right, so you graduated with a bachelor of science and animal science, right? So how has that worked its way into your books?
It hasn't. So really, I got a degree in animal science. I've always had an interest in working with people, and I had this long love of animals since I was a kid. And so I went and got a degree in animal science, wanting to train service animals, actually.
Yeah.
But along the way, I ended up starting to work with kids and kind of just shifted course from that. So the animal science, really, other than the fact that, like, who doesn't want to look at a cute dog in a book? And I've always loved their personalities. All animals have different personalities. So the first book where we used animals in the book was Rescue. And that was actually based on watching and observing, like, Walter and his friends and how they interacted in the backyard together, and laughing and being like, oh my gosh, these silly little creatures are like tag teaming this situation, and we could totally turn this into a story.
Yeah, and you have that. Honestly, you have some fantastic ones. Again, like, check her books down in the comments there, or not the comments, the description down below, because she has wonderful books, and I just always loved your heart for just people and animals as well. And so like you love animals, especially dogs, right? And so like, is there any animal that doesn't make your nice list, like you never ever get anywhere near?
Yeah, absolutely. In all seriousness, raccoons.
Really?
Raccoons are on my like, I cannot stand them. They are adorable. They're the cutest little things. But when I was in school, I worked for the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center of Minnesota. And I was the only person like at that point in time that summer as an intern who felt really comfortable working with the raccoons.
Uh-huh.
And so they kept putting me in the raccoon room, and I ended up working with raccoons so often that I like couldn't hear raccoon like noises for like years without being like having a little bit of like PTSD from it.
What is your life, Christine? That's like, I don't think I've ever met anyone that has been like traumatized by raccoons. That's so great.
So like the worst was one day, genuinely, I walked up to the back door to start my shift, and there was a note on the door that said, beware of loose raccoon. Hey, bye.
Yeah.
Like, what? Why is there a loose raccoon? And so I spent an entire 8-hour shift trying to avoid being attacked by this loose raccoon that had distemper. And they never found it. But he just like, they assumed he escaped like out of vent. But this raccoon like was in one room and jumped on a closed door to open up one door, got into the next room, ate a bird, jumped on the door again, let himself out of the next room into the like vet tech room where everybody was like, oh my God, there's a loose raccoon. And then like jumped on yet another door to let himself out into the remainder of the building, and then was never seen again.
He's still out there somewhere.
And I was like, I mean, I'm somewhere between wildly impressed by this raccoon and like also I don't really want to cross paths with him because he's clearly on a mission.
That's like, that is just, I'm horrified of raccoons now. It's like, and I thought like, I'd had rough work days where it's just like you have writer's block or something. I don't have to worry about watching my back for a raccoon.
You've never been greeted at the door with a like, beware of loose raccoon?
Yeah, as one does, that old chestnut.
Yeah, no, I've never had like that kind of interesting welcome to my workday ever since then. Like that by far takes the cake on the weirdest. Hey, welcome to your shift at work.
I'll expect to see this in an upcoming children's picture book from you.
I told you raccoons are like, I'm not a fan. I mean, they're like I said, they're cute. They're really funny to watch. They're very like they've got a lot of character to them, so they actually probably would make a really great character. Oh, but I've been bit by them 3 times.
Oh no.
Like I was like, I am done with raccoons for the rest of my life, and I never thought that was something I'd have to like qualify.
Well, you get the badge of courage. I don't even know what you get for that. I think you just get like bonus pay or something. So like, well, okay. So you just shared your raccoon story, like working with animals. Like, what has been like a funny or crazy thing you've seen an animal do, or was that your ultimate one?
That was probably the ultimate. Like the raccoons were probably the most comical by far. I think the only other animal that probably takes the cake in terms of character is with me right now. He was a stray when I got him. So, I mean, even just like that's happening.
Look at him steal the show.
Yeah, he has no focus anymore. He's just staring longingly at its treats. But I've never met a more like not fully aware of his own physical being animal before. He's really smart. He's really capable of doing a lot of great things. But he's the only dog I've ever known to run into 4 different inanimate and non-moving objects. So like my husband will laugh at me for sharing this because it just makes him into the biggest goofball. But his most recent issue was he ran face first into a boulder.
Like the largest rock possible. Like,
yeah, like, and it didn't come out, it didn't jump out and scare him. It didn't suddenly appear. No, it was there the whole time. And he just stopped paying attention and ran face first into a boulder.
now you can just say like I take care of Walt there, and that he survived being hit by a boulder. It's more dramatic that way. So like, all right, like you've also worked with youth, which are kind of like raccoons, right? and they like how is that like influenced like your writing at all, or has it?
Oh, it has influenced my writing so much. I worked with teens. And I had this conversation with a lot of other people who work with teenagers that like you either can work with teens or you can't.
Yeah, that is true.
They take a special kind of person because they're full of life and they don't necessarily, and not quite full of tact yet.
That's a great way. That's a very tactful way of putting it.
I absolutely loved working with the teens. But in working with them, I started to find a lot of different gaps that like things that I had learned over the years or things I had learned from my parents that kids didn't know. Most specifically, the one, my second book, Guts, is about intuition. And we're done.
He can escape. We'll miss him.
Yeah, so it's about intuition and what is intuition. And I remember having conversations with kids where they were like, I don't even know what intuition is. Nobody's talked to you about this yet? Like, that's a big thing to have no real way to like address for you. Like, you need some guidance here. And so I started working with the kids to be like, okay, like let's talk about what intuition is then. And okay, buddy. And as I started doing different things like that and having different conversations like that, I started realizing there is some real power in being able to give parents a book that takes that conversation and makes it easier for a parent who's not necessarily like equipped to have that conversation, or they're not really sure how to start that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's something I loved about your books when I came across them. I work with youth, and I've worked with youth from elementary all the way through high school, and I do feel exactly what you were talking about. I've been surprised by kids that have some of these things like respect or perseverance is a big one. Like they're like, what is perseverance? And it's like, and so I loved that each of your books kind of captures like one of those kind of big morals, and we'll definitely dive into all of them later. So but when it comes to kids, like what would you say is like kids are out there and wacky, and so like do you have a crazy kid story of something funny a kid did or said?
Yeah, so I've told this story to so many people because I think it's hysterical. It's an interaction that I think a lot of people would very quickly get offended by if it happened to them. But like, I couldn't help just laugh through the whole thing. And it goes back to that, like they're full of life and also lacking all tact.
It's true.
But I had this young girl who, I'd worked with her for a few years, and this was so many years ago, well before I started dating or married my husband. And she was very concerned about my love life. Very concerned.
That would be teens for you.
Yeah, 7th grade. She was like, "Oh my God, you are 24 and you're not." So I'm talking to her one day, and she was like, "Are you still single?" Yeah. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, you are going to be so lonely." wow, where's that coming from? And she was like, well, you're getting so old. You're just going to be so old and lonely and have lots of cats. Like, okay. This is like really, really not acceptable to just say to people. And I told her that, and she goes, well, I'm sorry, I'm just worried about you. You're going to end up like my aunt. She's old and lonely and has lots of cats. And I was like, this poor woman. And like, I just couldn't help but laugh because this is that mindset of a kid where like
Yeah.
her aunt was probably a year older than me. So like 25, just got out of a serious relationship and maybe had 2 cats. And here's her niece running around telling people like she's old, lonely, and has lots of cats.
Yeah, that'd be teens for you. They all think we're all like old spinsters, you know.
Old. But yeah,
you'll end up with a bunch of raccoons.
Well, and then, you know, just being myself and being like, ha ha ha, take this. I was like, well, I'm allergic to cats. So I can't get old and lonely and have lots of cats.
Boom.
And suddenly she just like was shook. She was like, oh my, you can't have cats? And walked out of the room, like just that baffled, like left. And as she's walking out the door, she goes, you can't have cats? You're gonna be so lonely. So every time like somebody would make any comment about like my love life at all, I'd be like, well, I'm gonna be so lonely. I can't have cats.
That is actually the bar, you know. It's like if you either have cats or you don't. I'm sorry, this is how it is in life, you know. I just hope everyone gets more cats. They'll protect you from the raccoons. So you were brave, like you're a brave human being anyway, like fighting raccoons. But like you were brave and went out on a limb, creating your own publishing company, like Dream Built Books. And so, what was that experience like?
Honestly, like it just was one of those things where I was fed up of not having control and not having the say in everything I was doing, but having all of these things I wanted to do. And it was just slowed down by somebody else's process. And so there was a certain point where if anybody's worked with like a vanity press, you do your own marketing, you do your own, you know, events, you do all of your own editing, you sometimes are finding your own illustrator. And I was like, okay, so the only thing I'm not doing is formatting the book, right? Like if that's the only thing I'm not doing, like I'm smart enough, I could do it, right?
Yeah, well, I feel on that. That's kind of my publishing journey too. I was like, you know, I was working through publishers, and I was like, you know, it came down to in modern times, it's like you also do all the marketing. So it's like, well, I guess I could just do the actual processing part myself.
Right. And I was like, okay, so if I can just like, I can have my own message, I can have my own brand, and I can just do this all. And very honestly, I was drinking wine one night and was like, how hard is it even to like apply for an LLC? And I went online and was like, oh, it's just a quick application. Okay, let's do it. And that is how I learned that they do not allow you to file an EIN between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 p.m.
Probably for that reason, they're like, we need to make sure people are like sober when they start companies.
Oh, that makes sense. But I woke up in the morning, and before I headed off to my full-time job, I jumped back on and actually filled out the application and sent it in. And so it's been wonderful. I would not go back and do it a different way. And I don't think that means that this is the route that everyone needs to take. And I think that's what I also really enjoy being able to share with people is there's not like a cookie cutter way to go about publishing a book. And a vanity press would work really well for some people. A traditional publisher would work really well for some people. And I just happened to be too much of a control freak, and I needed to overwhelm myself with all of it. And it's been a great adventure.
I feel you on all that. I was like, I had a very similar journey. I don't drink though, so I didn't get any of the fun part of like having some wine while doing it. So I guess I have cats though, so I'm good.
Yeah, so you're not lonely.
Yeah, that's how it works. So like what has been one of your kind of like greatest like triumph moments in making your own publishing company?
Oh, interesting. I think one of the biggest triumphs was actually with Home getting the honorable mention award for that book and for a children's book award. That was the biggest triumph, is finally hitting a point where I was starting to get some recognition and really being able to show that, I'm not just over here self-publishing. I'm on a mission. I have something I'm doing, and I mean business with these books.
Mm-hmm.
And finally hitting that point where somebody else also is like, oh yeah, no, this is worthwhile, is a really rewarding moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and that's how it's like especially when independent publish. I know we have a lot of people that watch this that want to know how to publish, and it's just such a wonderful feeling just to get a book out there. But like you said, when you've won an award or have somebody, like someone you don't know that just suddenly like has your book, it's just like there's words can't really describe it, just what a wonderful feeling that is. And so
Yeah.
so for where'd the name like Dream Built Books come from?
So I was trying to think of like what is a pretty universal name that could really grow with the company however I want to grow it, right? I didn't want something that was just tied to me in the event that I want to publish somebody else down the line. And I didn't want to be stuck with a certain, like one specific type of book if I wanted to expand that as well. And I wanted it to be memorable, something that's easy, catchy. And so Dream Built Books came from the idea. It started with, oh my God, what is that? There's a movie company that's like Dream.
Oh yeah, DreamWorks.
DreamWorks, yeah. I was thinking like in terms of that, like it's easy to say, easy to think about. But it was a dream of mine, and I was deciding to build it on my own and to chase down that dream myself. And so Dream Built, and then books.
Nice.
And that's really kind of like how it all came together, is like thinking from a branding perspective and then still wanting to be able to stay true to that idea that, our main message is built on dreams written with purpose. So focusing on that and really bringing that to the name of the company.
Cool. And as part of what you do and in your writing as well, it's like you're a very motivational, very inspirational person, I think anyway. And so like what like you do like some motivational kind of speaking and presenting. So what's that like? What's that about?
So primarily I either work with just anybody who's aspiring to write, or teens. I love going and presenting to teens, but really what I end up focusing on is that reality of I end up with a lot of people really caught off guard that I started publishing when I was 23, and that always kind of caught me off guard then, like, why couldn't I have published when I was 23? And so I talked to people a lot about, you can come up with a lot of reasons as to why to not chase whatever your dream is, whether that's publishing a book, whether that's, running a 10K, whether that's starting some other business. There are always going to be obstacles. There's always going to be reasons why you can't. I was poor. I was living like paycheck to paycheck, working youth programming and buried in student loans. And that's when I started publishing. And like it took every last penny I had to get to the point where I could pay for my first book.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can find a way to scrape it together to get that first book produced, so could you. And that's not to say that you need to, or that there's a specific route, but chase it down, go for it, because there's never going to be a better time than the moment when you're really inspired to chase it. And
Mhm.
and again, there's always going to be obstacles. In the last oh my gosh, how many? Almost 7 years of publishing, I have hit every roadblock I could possibly imagine. And there have been so many times where I stopped and was like, oh my gosh, is this really worth it? Like, I mean, this is cool, but I've already published 4 books. Like, do I need to publish more? Because I don't know. This
Yes,
is
you do, because
hard.
they're good books. So definitely keep doing it.
Well, and then what would happen is somebody would grab one of my books and tell me this meant something to them. And okay, well, then how do I walk away now? That
Mhm.
was the goal. The goal was that it meant something to a kid or to a mom who's reading it to her kid. And something would like reignite that spark. And so there's always a way to overcome the obstacle. It's just a matter of how bad do you want it.
Yeah, and again, I just meshed with you on so much of this, Christine. I struggled with writing growing up, and I failed at writing growing up, and so it's actually my joy to. I used to be a teacher, but it's my joy to actually go back and share that with kids. Like, I failed at writing. I never expected to be a writer, and now I'm a best-selling author, and so it's like getting to share that with kids and see that for them. I had a kid just today actually talk to me about like I can't publish anything. He said, I'm a kid. And I told him, I was like, well, that's the exciting thing of nowadays. You absolutely can if that's what you want to do. You just have to work at it. And so
Yep.
that's the big thing. So I'm meshing with you. I connect with you on that. So let's dive all into your books because they really are fantastic books. And I want to make sure we have time to share at least some of your book as well. And so I'm going to share the first lines from your book here, Home, which we're going to talk all about today, even though you have a whole plethora of books. So we're going to show them all off and hold them up by all means, Christine, whenever you want. We're all about shameless self-promotion. You're required to on the show. You have to show off your work. And so like, here's the first lines, and I always play, and then the murders began for the fun of it, even though you don't have murders in your book, but I always do it for the fun of it because that's just me. I started in horror, so I have to have murder somewhere. So here's the first lines with a bit of murder. All the pups were outside playing in the yard when Henry came out and shared some news that was just a little hard. He gathered them together and told them all that very soon we're moving to a new house and I'm getting a brand new room. And then the murders began, and it started so happy, and then it got dark. so
You never know. It is a new house.
that is true. It could be haunted by the spirit of a dog. No, and so or a raccoon, even worse. And so like, sorry. and so
That's what,
like so like diving on in. Yeah, just tell us a bit about Home, and tell us just a bit about like the whole series in general.
yeah. So Home was a really fun one. I in my 20s moved a lot, so much. And I know that that can be a really hard thing for kids, but again, that fluffy guy that ditched the interview, what I started seeing in him was it created anxiety for him when we would move into a new house. And I was like, bud, you're fine. Your food came with you. It's okay. But he would get anxious. And so, and I have anxiety, and I think a lot of people do. So starting to kind of have that conversation about, how do you find comfort in the uncomfortable and in the things that are uncertain in your future. And for kids, I think a lot of times that comes back to remembering that comfort is where your family is, and that's really what counts. And so that's what eventually creates the comfort for them. But yeah, this was a really fun book because again, this is one that has Walter in it. You can see him right here. And he just panics about the silliest things. It's things like, are there going to be enough chipmunks in the yard? And where will all my toys go? And then he gets there and none of that stuff is really an issue. Because again, change can be hard, change can be scary, but just because it's different doesn't mean that it's bad.
Nice. And so like are well, in a way, I mean, you just brought up like, Walter is in there. So, but like, and in a way, you also brought up like, some of your own anxiety and moving in your situation. But for your series in general, because you pick a lot of different kind of topics, are any of those other books inspired by like a specific person or event in real life?
Yes. So home is very much, based on, I moved a lot. I saw kids move a lot when I was
Mhm.
working with them. Rescue is the one that I watched them in the backyard, and they looked like they were like lining up in this like mini militia against like a neighbor dog. And so I was like, this is super funny. I also have worked in a lot of different environments where like I've had teams that don't value different people at the table, and I've worked in environments where they do. And so being able to show that, using the three dogs, that you can bring different things to the table, and that's what makes you succeed, was really fun because we've all worked on those teams. Um,
Yeah, you're stuck in one right now. Sorry, Christine. That's how it is on the show. Just joking. You're valued here.
um, Guts, again, that goes right back to when I was working with kids. And the number of times I had to say, just because your friends were doing it doesn't make it right. Well, I knew it wasn't right. And I'm like, okay, but you got to listen to that voice telling you it's not right. You can't just like acknowledge it and move on. So that's where that one had come from. I'm trying to think. Kind was the same kind of idea where I talked with kids a lot about, when I said it so often when I was working with teens, all emotions come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so to just outrightly be like, no, they're just a bully. No, they're not just a bully. Those negative emotions are coming from somewhere. Most likely not from anything you actually did, but from something else, and they need to get it out somewhere. And so focusing rather on this being like the bully is bad, how do we look at this and say, okay, I'm okay. This isn't necessarily about me, and I'm resilient. I can handle this. And I can take a second to step outside of myself, look at this other person and see what might be hurting them. And how can I, instead of being hurt by this, help this person? Because I worked with teens during like some of the heaviest, anti-bullying campaigns. Mm-hmm. And that was hard because, again, a lot of these kids who were being labeled as a bully, if you just knew more about what was going on, you're like, no, they just got to get it out somewhere, and it's all misdirected.
Well, and there was a lot of like extremes at the time, like either like pretend like it didn't exist, or like they're a bully and label them as such. And it was like, finding that middle ground of shutting that down, but also teachable moment, right?
Yeah, well, and empowering young people to not feel as though like the world is beating them sideways because of them and because mm-hmm. of who they are. No, you're fine as you are. You're okay. This is happening. That's not to say that something's wrong about you. It just means that this is happening. Now, how do we look at this without feeling like, we're just being destroyed by it? And that's that resilience of, okay, you got to take a step back, like feel your feelings, experience those, but you can't stay down and in those feelings forever. Otherwise, you're not going to pick yourself up and move forward.
Truth. And so each of your stories, right? It's molded kind of around like a good moral, like we're talking about, or kind of a teachable moment. So like, how do you pick those themes for your book?
Oh, that's a good question. It usually happens just by happenstance sometimes.
Yeah.
Or I will be thinking about something that's actually affecting my personal life in that moment and trying to like work myself through the same lesson that I want to teach kids. And what would I tell myself if I was talking to a teenager? And if I need to hear it now as an adult, then I probably needed it as a kid too. So how do we write this into a story? Um, so I think when I want to say that's kind of, I had lost my second grandparent, well, third grandparent, but the second grandparent that I'd known
I'm
a
sorry,
couple
that's hard.
years ago. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a couple years ago, and I had a wonderful coworker who pointed out that the reason why loss sometimes, and especially grandparents, can be hard is that's a piece of your childhood leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband was talking to me about like loss happens, and you need to just allow that loss to be something that you feel. Otherwise, you're not going to move past it. And it got me to thinking about, all of the different types of loss that we have in our lives. And how do you talk to a kid about that? How do you get that, like, without being like, here's a whole book about death? I mean, I know you like horror and murder, but kids are a little softer than that. You can't just scare them right
All
out the
right,
gate.
fine. I guess we can wait till they're 10. No, it's
Yeah, next book, we'll talk middle grade and
no, those younger ones, especially, like they kind of lack, like we talk about that a lot when in youth development, like they lack the ability to abstract. So you got to give them something physical, and that's what I love about your books. You give them that like story to latch on to help them process that.
Yeah, well, and so with Lost, I focused on the first big loss a lot of kids start to experience is like a favorite toy or something that is just like you lose it somewhere along the road. Like we've all heard parents talk about that, like, oh my gosh, that favorite toy fell out of the car on that family road trip and we had a full-blown meltdown.
Yeah.
Yeah. So using that and trying to share, like I said, I was working through my own loss at that point in time, and trying to use that to push myself and work through those feelings myself. And then how would you tell that to a kid? Yeah. So that it's like a really long-winded way of saying it's usually something that I am still dealing with myself because none of us are perfect. And
well, and I just love like that connection though. It's like in my books, even my horror books, right? I wrapped them around something that I dealt with. My book Pandora is all about like, kind of like Pandora's box, all the evil leaked out and there's the hope left inside. But like it was all about finding hope in a dark place. And that was me, kind of like what you were talking about, Christine. I went through a loss and I was like, how do you find hope in a dark place? And that's kind of what I wrapped it around. And so I think it's nice for kids to see that things they go through are also things adults go through too. And there's that connection too.
yeah, oh my gosh, absolutely. So two thoughts I have is what you pointed out is you write what you know.
Mm.
And like, so even with like home, my whole family laughed when they found out I was writing a book about change because they're like, you have always been the worst at managing change. And I was like, well, that makes me the expert on talking else about it, right? So you write what you know. And then on top of that, you pointed out that kids often don't really realize that adults are going through the same thing. And I remember having that conversation with so many teenagers of, they would look at me and they'd be like, well, you're an adult. You have it all figured out.
You don't have cats, but you got to figure it out.
Right. And I was like, you're kidding yourself. Like, no, we don't have it all figured out. We put on a good front sometimes. But no, we don't. And being honest about that helps other people. And in general, I mean, it's just, like I said, it makes it easy to write the books when that's something that is true to my heart at that moment in time.
Nice. Yeah. Well, and so I'm curious from you, like, just as a structural thing, because it's like I wrote a children's book, but that was actually really, really hard for me to write, even though I write novels and I write comics. But I wanted to write a children's book because I work with children at lots of different ages, and so I thought it'd be fun to write something for them too. But I struggled actually when it came to you tend to write in using rhyme schemes. So like, and that's why I end up writing too, because I just love rhyme scheme, but I found it really difficult myself. So for you, like, does kind of like the story come first, or like, do you kind of find a good like flowing rhyme and kind of work your story around it?
Oh my gosh, it's all over the place. I feel bad. Anytime I talk to somebody about writing in my books, they always want to know, like, what's the process? And sometimes the rhyme comes first, sometimes the storyline comes first. But really, and this is, I think, the hardest part, and I'm sure you get this as well, is until like some part of the story comes into my head, nothing's happening. There is nothing to write. And so all of a sudden I'll be driving in my car and like, I'll just pick one of the things from my book. I don't know. But I'll be riding in my car. That's not even a good one to work off of. I don't know.
They're all good ones.
And I'll be like talking to myself, and I'll be like, we're moving to a new house and I'm getting a brand new room. They jumped for joy with Henry until he ran back inside. And then they went and found their favorite spot by the slide. Oh, of course. Why didn't I think of that earlier? And like, I'll grab my phone and record myself real quick. Because like I said, I tend to be in my car.
Uh-huh.
The worst spot to come up with
to do some writing, right?
Not gonna work. So I'll like record myself real quick and I'll say it, and then go back and work off of that first line. And that first line almost always is in my books. Whatever like sparked it all, that almost never leaves the book. And then from there I'll start, piecing out the story, because it comes down to, how do you start the conversation? What is going to be the big issue and like conflict or big challenge that you're talking about, and then how are you going to resolve it? Because I would never want a kid to walk away from one of my books not feeling like they know what to do or how to approach this. And once I start piecing out the story and kind of figuring out where I want to go with it, then it comes back to like, okay, so I know what I want to say here, but now I have to think like, what words rhyme? Okay. And like, how do you work through, like, I'll get like one line written, and then the next line, I know exactly what I want to say, but then it doesn't rhyme. Or like, there are no words that fit that line that rhyme with the words before it. And I end up like sitting by myself being like, slide. Okay. Next.
I really hope your 7th grade friend comes walking by and you're just sitting on a park bench staring off into space, like, slide. And she's just gonna be like, she's so lonely. Go get her a cat, please. Oh, well, I honestly, Christy, I've meshed with you so much on this entire conversation. Cause like, I with my children, my foray into children's books, I did with the Onion Knight, and I had my overall idea of what I wanted, but I had to change a decent amount of that story because I would get to a point where I'm like, there is just no good word that rhymes with orange. Like, I was like, what can rhyme with orange? All right, strike the orange. There's no orange in the story. So
the other big thing I always run into is I'm very intentional about I never ever want to produce a book that dumbs down the story and uses simple words only. That adds no benefit to a kid. So I like to use my language the way I would use my language if I was talking to an adult. And so it'll be a word like positivity. And I'm like, oh gosh, how do you rhyme with positivity? I'm like, yes, you can just use anything like me. Okay, sure. But like, does it fit the sentence? And is it like jiving with the cadence of the next, like, of the word positivity? Not always.
Relativity. Oh, by the way, welcome. Kariston says hi, by the way. So
Hi.
Hello,
Yeah.
Kariston.
Welcome everybody who's paying attention.
We've got several people in our live chat. By all means, throw a question for Christine if you're joining us just now. You missed Walter, her awesome dog, but he's hiding.
He's passed out. No, he's sleeping.
Yeah, that's okay. That's half our audience anyway when they watch me, so it's okay. I
Oh
put them
no,
to
don't
sleep.
take it personal. It's just nap time, you know.
Yeah, I hear you. That's what I tell myself when I'm trying to pet my cats. All right, so here I want to make sure we have time to share some of your work because your work is fantastic. I love your children's books, and we've gotten a chance to talk about them. So I want to share a good chunk of Home. We're not going to get a chance to finish it, but I want to give people like a look at it because like it's not only like your excellent rhyme scheme that you had to sit out there like slide, but it also has just wonderful illustrations too. So here we're going to share just a bit of Home for our audience to give them an idea. Hopefully it popped up. There we go. So here we go. I'm going to read to you just a bit of Home. So get to sit back, audience. It's just like back in the day when you got read to. So we have Home by Christine Reynebeau and illustrated by Ashley Bates. And look, you can see, by the way, here's Walter. Oh my goodness, Walt. I'm not going to get over. I just still want everyone to bring a puppy when you come to interview from now on. It's a requirement. All right, Home by Christine Reynebeau, illustrated by Ashley Bates. And I used to talk to kids about this when I read to them in elementary. I love how all your end pages are just like there's always something there. It's never just white end pages. I call that a polar bear in a snowstorm. So you could share a message in this book to all the bumps, twists, and crazy right turns that have taught me how to embrace change, and to all the patient people in my life who deal with me when I struggle with it. Extra thanks to Ben for helping with this book and holding Walt's paw when he cries. Oh. All the pups were outside playing in the yard when Henry came out and shared some news that was just a little hard. He gathered them together and told them all that very soon we're moving to a new house and I'm getting a brand new room. They jumped for joy with Henry until he ran back inside. They then convened in their favorite spot underneath the slide. Finley said he felt nervous, and Phoebe didn't understand why, but Walter took it the worst and quickly began to cry. That breaks my heart now that I saw Walter. Would the new house be filled with hardwood halls? that would be something a dog would think about. Would they have a place for Phoebe's collection of balls? He was scared there wouldn't be any room to play or enough chipmunks to chase each day. Finley tried to soothe him with a hug as he wiped away a tear and reminded him it's usually way better than what we fear. I'll just read it just a couple more since we're almost out of time. Phoebe tossed him a ball and encouraged him to play. She reminded him, even if it isn't perfect, we will find a way. Walter slumped around the yard, still feeling unsure and scared, when Henry knelt down to pet him and said, I know it's hard, but don't compare. And we'll kind of leave it off on that one for the moment. So, and bring it back. Oh yeah, there's Walter. Yay.
Brought him back.
Yes, in real life too. Look at him; he's still waking up. And so yeah. Once again, I just love the heartfelt nature of your books. I love, like you said, giving parents and other kids a chance to have a tool to look at with kids, and you said even older kids, like teens, and I just think that's great because I still read aloud to even older kids. I read aloud to teens as well. I just don't think it's something we should ever lose, and I just love that. So how, Christine, like before we run out of time, how can we as a community support you? I mean, we already have your links down there in the description. People should go check them out. They're wonderful books, but how else can we support you?
Yeah, I would say, join us on any of the social media platforms. That's always a fun way. I love getting to meet other authors, finding, moms or teachers who want to work with me on the books, anything to get in front of a bunch of kids and share the books more. But on top of that, going to our website and checking out our teams page, I do have an 8th book coming out this summer. So we are always looking for people who are excited about new books, who want to, have a first peek at a new book. And we're getting our launch team ready to go for that. So if you enjoy any of our books and you want to get more involved, that is the easiest way to do it. And we have a lot of fun with it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, and as always on Diabolic Shrimp, we always get people back on here in a few months. It's a young show still, so we haven't had a chance to get anyone back on quite yet because it's coming up here. So down the road, if you're watching, we'll get another chance to have Christine back on. So by all means, if you want to support her, throw some questions down in the comments. I'll make sure that she gets those, or we get to ask them next time with her. And by all means, throw down your raccoon emojis or cat emojis for poor Christine to show that love for her and her book. So Christine, thank you so much for being on Diabolic Shrimp. It was such a blast having you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Awesome. Well, I'll let you hang out with Walt here, and I'll bring it back. So thanks, Christine.
Yes, thanks.
So that was Christine Reynebeau. And once again, all of her stuff is down there in the description below. Please do support her. She's a very supportive, kind person towards other people. She has such a wonderful heart for people and for animals. And so if you would like to support this channel and Diabolic Shrimp in general, this is connected to diabolicshrimp.com. If you want to check that out, hit that subscribe button down below. Leave comments for any of our authors. I always make sure that they get them. And so there's interactivity there. And if you'd like to also support myself as an author, I'm a best-selling author. You can buy any of my books. They're also in the description down below. A portion of the money I make from any of these ventures goes towards universally good things like childhood disease research and planting trees and ocean exploration. So if you want to help out in those things, by all means, hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the channel or buy any of my books. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm still over the moon by getting to see a puppy today. But thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this. This has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.